What is going on, everybody, and welcome to the fourth episode of Creepypasta story time. And as you can see on the screen, we're going to be finishing the original Jeff the Killer saga with Born of Science, the birth of Jane the Killer. Now, this is just like the origins, but it's still technically her story. So we might just continue on, read stories that happen after the events of their original stories. But for those of you who do not know, Jane the Killer was one of Jeff's earliest victims, and she died in a brutal death. And then she came back and always wanted to hunt down criminals. And she also kills people to spare them of being one of Jeff's victims. So let's begin. 2002 was never a good year for Jane Richardson, losing both of her parents to Jeff the Killer, tackling a job at IHOP as a waitress with barely enough money to get by on, and being both mother and father to her little sister Jessie, who was 13 years old during that time. Jane's aunt Samantha Engel graciously helped out her nieces as far as money was concerned, so it wasn't a total loss for Jane. After all, Samantha was Paula's sister, and after her death, Samantha felt it was right to take care of her sister's daughters. One day, while Jane was working her usual shift at IHOP and on her break, she came across an ad in the newspaper sponsored by her local blood bank. It was an ad for the person that it was said that the person would be paid $150 for their distribution, but they had to have a really healthy blood type in order to qualify. $150 just for giving blood? Was this too good to be true? Jane thought it would be good to take that money and pay off her month's rent. So why not? After all, she did have clean blood. Without hesitation, Jane wrote the address of the local blood bank down, plus the phone number, finished off her orange juice, and went back to work. Another waitress, Alexis, who was working for Jane, noticed her mood was more optimistic and appeared more pleasant as usual, refilling other customers' drinks. "Well, someone is really happy today," Alexis said. "Why wouldn't I be? I found an easy way to pay off my month's rent," Jane replied, pouring a fresh cup of coffee for a random man. "Thanks," the man said. "Oh yeah? What?" Alexis asked. "The blood bank is offering $150 for anyone giving blood. You had to have healthy blood," it said. "Whoa, I never heard of that, Janie. Usually they'd pay you $25, Alexis replied, refilling a customer's soda. "Somehow, they must have made a few changes. You gonna swing by? After I leave here tonight." Jane and her friend worked on through the night until the atmosphere of this IHOP was calm, laid back, and less rushed. The lights of the shopping center where the restaurant was shine through the windows. Random cars on the highway passed by in the distance. Motorists who were looking for a bite to eat, getting off work, or going home set the mood for this particularly lazy California night.
Next time, start saving the messages.
KTLA News 5 was given a report of the LAPD still pursuing Jeffrey Woods, a.k.a. Jeff the Killer, the one responsible for the murder of Jane's parents. The police commissioner said they were having a hard time catching the suspect and had to enlist the aid of the FBI, CIA, and Department of Justice in their manhunt. It would make Jane feel better to not only have Jeff captured, but wiped off the face of the earth entirely. One of the customers in IHOP that Jane noticed was a man in his late 40s with short brown hair, a goatee, sunglasses, and wearing a black three-piece suit and tie, crisply pressed. He looked like Walter White with hair. Another distinguishing feature about this man was a Bluetooth earpiece hanging on his left earlobe. He browsed through the menu and surveyed the employees. He paid close attention to Jane, almost as if she was a payments person. "Hello, sir. What can I get you tonight?" "T-bone steak and eggs. How do you want your steak?" "Well done. Eggs over easy." "Well done. Over easy." "Oh, I just wanted to let you know that we have a new pomegranate pancake syrup. Something I made." "Wow, that sounds like a winner. You made the syrup?" "Sure did." "You got a lot of talent." Jane went back into the kitchen to get the man's food prepared. While he was waiting, he fumbled with the button on his earpiece. "We found the perfect woman, sir." This man was actually an FBI agent. Agent Marcus East was still hunting down Jeff the Killer. Despite the LAPD's futile efforts and Agent East's determination, he was going to stop at nothing until Jeff was captured. Excellent. Gather the other agents for next week. We know of a way to go after Jeffrey Woods. Understood. Jane brought out East me a fresh cup of coffee. Thank you very much, ma'am. You are certainly welcome, sir. I'll see you tomorrow, Alexis. See you, Janie. After 30 minutes of being on the road, Jane came across the blood bank. She expected the building to be closed for the night, but oddly, it was open. This must have been a 24-hour deal. The outside of the building looked like total shit, but the interior was very pristine and sterile, similar to a doctor's office. Jane approached the receptionist at the desk and announced she was there to give blood. Good evening, ma'am. How can I help you? I came across your ad saying that you would pay anyone $150 for simply giving blood. Wonderful. What's your name, dear? Jane Richardson. Okay, Miss Richardson. You go down the hall, second door on your right. Do I have to sign any papers or anything? No. Oh, thank God. I'll have your cash ready for you when you get done, honey. Jane did indeed have healthy, clean blood. O negative was her blood type. After like hours, but only a few minutes, the doctor who extracted Jane's blood put a bandage over her spot and wished her good night. Out front, the receptionist was going through files on her computer when she saw Jane. Man, that needle hurt like hell. Your arm is going to feel sore for a day or two. Tell me about it. Okay, here's your cash, Miss Richardson. $150. This will take care of my month's rent. Behind in your rent, huh? A lot of stuff that's been going on, me losing both my parents and all. Oh, I'm so sorry. It's just me and my little sister. I have to be both mom and dad to her. Well, my condolences go out to you and your sister, Jane. Thanks, that means a lot. You have a wonderful night, sweetie. Stay safe. You too. The following morning, Jane was able to pay her month's rent and wouldn't have to worry about it until next month. While working the day shift at IHOP, Jane got a call from the blood bank she visited just the other night. What could it be? Thank you for calling IHOP, now serving pomegranate pancake syrup on our new stuffed French toast. This is Jane Richardson. How may I help you? Miss Richardson, this is she. My name is Beth Williams, one of the doctors at the Biomedics Blood Bank. We were wondering if you could come by next week to give another sample of your blood. Okay. We will pay you $10,000. 10 grand for another sample of blood? Was this for real? Miss Richardson, are you there? Oh, yeah, I'm here. You said 10,000, right? Yes, ma'am. Okay, I'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Miss Richardson. We will see you soon. Bye. Bye-bye. 1 week later. It was the start of a beautiful day in the city of angels. Jane returned to the Biomedics Bank to distribute her blood and score an easy 10 grand. She wouldn't have to worry about money troubles ever again. But why was Biomedics going to pay Jane $10,000? She couldn't figure it out herself, but if it meant to put that money into an account and make sure that her and her sister were financially secure. Jane saw the same receptionist from last time and still remembered her, and the doctor who drew her blood was there as well. When it was all over, Jane claimed her cash, stuffed it into her wallet, and was on her way. Just as she was about to get into her car, a couple of well-dressed women approached her. One of them, faster CIA agent, announced, Jane Richardson? Yeah. Agent Tanya Margolis, CIA. What's going on? You didn't do anything wrong, Miss Richardson, but don't worry, but I was wondering if you could come with us. Where at exactly? You will see. Come with us. Without hesitation, Jane got into the limo with the other agents. Where were they taking her? Why did they choose Jane? Was there any significance? The two women were taking Jane to the CIA headquarters in Los Angeles, and they were going to explain everything to her as they arrived. 90 minutes later, the limo arrived outside of the headquarters. Jane noticed there was also a U.S. Marshal and FBI van parked outside. What was this all about? Jane couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. No matter how many times she asked the agents, it was always the same. That information is classified. Jane wanted answers. She wanted to know what was going on. Once inside, Jane was greeted by a refreshing cold breeze that seemed to be coming from the central air units. It was the hottest day ever. Jane was led to a room that looked like a police interrogation area. There inside was another male agent. Jane sat. Welcome, Jane. We've been expecting you. You mind telling me what the hell is going on? Not at all. First off, I just want to say I'm sorry for the loss of your parents. I know how much you loved them. I take it you heard that the LAPD is having a difficult time pursuing your parents' assailant, Jeffrey Woods? Jeff the Killer? Exactly. We also got in touch with the FBI, U.S. Department of Justice, and the U.S. Marshals, and they're going to see to it that Jeff is stopped once and for all. But what does this have to do with me? After receiving word of your blood transfer at Biomedics, it is apparent that you are the perfect blood type and gave the key to stopping Jeffrey Woods. So let me get this straight. After I gave my blood, you and these other agency guys want to use me to stop that son of a bitch, Jeff? Yes, ma'am. All you have to do is meet with our doctors. Just meet up with the doctors? Yes, ma'am. And then I'm free to go? In due time, I promise you. Well, okay. After she was led into another room, one doctor did an eye scan of her ice blue eye after giving her a vision test, reading an eye chart, etc. The scan of her pretty blue eye was stored into the computer. Next doctor to examine her was a cardiologist, following a few brief questions such as her date of birth, height, weight, that sort of thing. Jane had her blood pressure checked, which is 120/80. The normal blood pressure for a healthy young lady. Very good. He checked her heartbeat and asked her to breathe when using his stethoscope. The cardiologist wrote down everything. Next, a general practitioner was to examine Jane, checking her eyes, ears, throat, testing her reflexes, you name it. Jane passed with flying colors. Jane thought she was going to leave this building with no problem and be on her way. But when she was led down a hallway by two guards, she noticed in one of the rooms stretchers lined up with blankets covering the bodies. A total of 25 people, all young women, dead. What was going on here? She started to get freaked out at the sight of the lifeless women who haven't been disposed of and anxiously asked where the guards were taking her. They refused to answer. So out of instinct, she began to assault the guards, incapacitating one of them. Her fighting skills, she learned from Mary's father, Sheriff Nick, really paid off. In the midst of the brutal melee, Jane was tackled and sedated by one of the doctors. Her world began to blur and fade black. Where am I? She was strapped to a chair similar to what you'd see in a dentist's office. Around her, the room looked like an operating theater, bathed in a bright white light which gave the room a clean appearance. Jane couldn't see anybody because all that was in the room with her facing towards her was a two-way mirror. She felt something on her forehead that was similar to a headband, but saw electrodes and wires running away from her. Her hands and feet were secured in place. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't break free. A few seconds later, she heard an unknown female voice on the intercom. It must have been that of an agent, researcher, or scientist. Miss Richardson, can you hear me? Who's there? It's me, Dr. Beth Williams from Biomedics. I didn't want to have you to find out the hard way, but some of these agents and government officials tell me you have a very healthy blood type, and from what I can gather, they were correct. If you are wondering, it was me who sedated you. I did not drag you into the room which you are in, dear, I can assure you. I will be standing by to monitor your vitals through this process. What are you talking about? Jane, we brought you here because you are the perfect blood type and also the candidate for the following experiment that's been funded by the U.S. government, totaling at $6.9 million. We have received word from the LAPD that they had trouble in capturing the suspect responsible for the death of your parents, Bruce and Paula. And we, along with the FBI, Department of Justice, and the U.S. Marshals, agreed on the capture of Jeffrey Woods. If you haven't noticed, there is an intravenous needle in your arm. One of the scientists will be bringing in the serum to replace with your blood. The serum is classified, but it will ultimately help you in getting revenge on the one who took your parents' lives. Just then, a scientist and doctor came into the room prepping Jane. The scientist came in with the liquid hate. The container was 1.25 gallons with a biohazard symbol on it. The light from overhead cast in the liquid, giving off a pretty glowing purple. The doctor who came in there was to make sure everything was ready and to monitor Jane's safety. He assured her she had nothing to be afraid of and that she was going to be okay afterwards. This made Jane feel somewhat better. A part of her was scared to death, but the other half of her showed no fear and she was ready. The doctor put the intravenous tube into Jane's arm. The one tube ran into a container that would collect Jane's blood and shipped to the American Red Cross for patients who had the same blood type as her. and to receive a healthy blood transfusion, the other tube was attached to the container holding the liquid hate. So in a way, this was just like an embalming fluid prep setup, but with an experimental liquid. Despite being reassured by medical personnel that she had nothing to be scared of, a single tear ran down her face. The process began. The voices Jane heard, the scientists, the government officials, FBI, CIA agents, U.S. Marshals, researchers, began to sound distant, as something were to happen to her. She would see her deceased parents on the other side of the two-way mirror. Doctors were monitoring Jane's vitals, her heart and brain waves, etc. Her heart was beating at a steady pace, showing the EKG beeping, the readings of the EEG showing normal brain activity. Jane saw her blood being drained slowly. This didn't bother her at first, but as it began to increase, she felt very weak and drowsy, almost like she was being smothered by an unknown person with an ether-soaked rag. And in the next few minutes, Jane's surroundings began to disappear, first into a state of unconsciousness and weakness from a loss of blood in her body, then dead. The heart monitor in the other room flatlined. The EEG went flat. For that moment, Jane was clinically dead. Jane felt a gentle, familiar hand on her face, caressing her. It was her mother, Paula. She opened her eyes, and despite being deceased for over a few minutes, she was still in the room. Her father, Bruce, was there as well. Mom? Don't be afraid, Janie. Mommy's here. Paula... Never mind. She saw Jane's eyes welling up with tears and held her daughter in her arms tightly, comforting her. Daddy. Bruce gave Jane a kiss on her head as he joined in to hold his child as well. Jane was weeping as she was glad to see her parents. You're going to be okay, kiddo. You're going to be just fine. He was in full military dress, his medals shining in the light of the room Jane was in. His uniform was crisply pressed, his short hair shiny and brushed back, almost as if he was going to attend a military ball. Mommy, what's going on? Well, since those doctors emptied your body, you went out like a light, but me and Daddy are going to stay here until you come alive, honey. One thing I could never stand about IV needles is when someone can't find a vein to put it in. This happened to me when I was a little kid, and I suffered sepsis, and I felt like frickin' Swiss cheese. That old hag couldn't put the needle in right. You should have known that having experience as a doctor and a PhD doesn't come with vision. This made Jane smile and giggle as she laughed with her daddy. She knew for the longest time that her daddy was very silly and made her laugh without even trying, and was still a goofball in the afterlife. That's also what Paula loved about her husband. Jane's parents stayed with her until the liquid hate was administered. Your father couldn't stand needles being poked into him at all, honey. But getting like an allergy shot or vaccine, that didn't bother him. It was an intravenous needle that got on his nerves. Even when he was little, he fainted at the sight of a big needle. Hey, that thing was big.
Just text me.
I know I'm going to feel sore and stiff when I get up. Considering the chair you're in, I wouldn't be surprised, honey. I think tonight you should take a nice hot bath with some Epsom salts. Good idea. You just remember one thing, my little Janie baby. If you ever need me or Daddy, we'll be right here. Pointing to Jane's heart. And we will come live in your dreams, sweetheart. We are so proud of you. Jessie's lucky to have such a sweet sister. We will always be watching over you, love. We love you, Jane. Oh, the purple stuff is about finished. Pointing to the liquid hate that was almost halfway empty. I love you, Mommy. I love you, Daddy. We love you too, Janie. Jane slowly regained consciousness and came to. The EKG and EEG roared back to life, showing heart and brain activity. Her vitals appearing normal as her vision adjusted. She saw she was still in the operating theater. When she looked down, she noticed her hands were now ivory white. She was pale like a corpse. She screamed over the loss of her natural skin pigmentation and saw that her once bright platinum blonde hair was now coal black. She tried to break free from the restraints, thinking that she would fail, but somehow with now increased strength ripped both of the restraints right off and jerked the wires off her head. She tore the leg restraints away and got up out of the chair. She looked towards the two-way mirror now in a violent, angry, homicidal rage, hollered, "What the hell did you do to me?" She's going to experience violent episodes and homicidal tendencies for the first 90 seconds. You are now full of liquid hate, Miss Richardson. I look like fucking powder. That's because your natural skin color went away, Jane. Jane picked up a chair that was in the room and threw it against the two-way mirror, shattering the glass. She grabbed a hold of one of the doctors who were monitoring her vitals by the collar, slamming him against the wall with incredible strength, causing a huge dent. One of the scientists sounded an alarm for armed guards and medical personnel to restrain Jane. One pulled out a wrench trying to aim for Jane's neck, but Jane took the needle and stabbed the doctor between the eyes and injected an air bubble into him. Two guards with automatic weapons tried to fire at Jane, but she grabbed both of their arms, causing them to fire at each other. One agent fired at Jane, but the bullet didn't faze her a bit. The wound automatically and quickly healed up. She approached the agent, who was still firing multiple shots at Jane, and snapped his wrist in two, showing fractured bones and blood spurting everywhere. An orderly, standing in at 6.65, 300 plus pounds, tackled Jane, attempting to subdue her. But Jane, at the upper hand, flipped him over on his side and snapped his neck in two. Just as the carnage continued, Jane took the now empty liquid hate container, broke it against the ground, took a sharp glass shard, and stabbed to death one of the agents. Her clothes, now stained with blood, amidst the dead, broken, mutilated, bullet-riddled bodies and those who were out cold, Jane looked at the group who was in the room that now had no mirror and said in an ominous tone, "Thank you for saving me. Thank you for making me what I am. I now know what I must do. I must kill Jeffrey Woods and end his reign of terror forever. If he is not killed, more lives will be lost. I am much stronger now. I am unstoppable, unkillable. Weapons are useless against me. Anyone who dares crosses me, I will be the last thing that they ever see. I will kill Jeff the Killer, and no one can stop me." Jane's homicidal tendencies ceased, and she was acting normal again. The same doctors who examined her wanted to do x-rays, MRI scans, and the final examination on her. Jane stood naked as the day she was born, as physicians didn't see any abnormal changes, no defects. She was even more beautiful, despite the fact that she was pale white with black eyes. "Okay, Miss Richardson, I want you to read what is on this chart right here." The eye doctor was flabbergasted that Jane read down everything to the fine print. He took a magnifying glass and saw the address and company name at the bottom of the eye test chart. Wow. "So, Doc, are there any other tests today, or can I just walk out of here and be on my way?" "Well, you are going to have to give me another visual test, or just stand there and stare at me all day." I'm just going to stand here and stare at you all day," seeing Jane fully naked. "So, I'll take that as you are free to go." "Yeah." Jane took her blood-stained clothes that were in a hospital bag and walked out fully nude, not caring that people are looking at her. On her way home, she saw clothes that were hanging on a clothesline outside a little suburban home. These clothes matched her frame. They were a pair of black sweatpants, a sleeveless black Under Armour shirt, and a black hoodie. They all smelled sweet as she pulled them off the clothesline and got dressed in broad daylight. The only article of clothing that weren't bloodstained were her black Skechers sneakers. She slipped on her socks and shoes and called Jessie to tell her she was okay. Jessie waited back at home for her sister to return. Also, Mary was waiting. Jessie immediately ran into her big sister's arms, gasping emotionally, giving her a big hug. Mary hugged both Jessie and Jane and gave her Honey Bunny a kiss on the lips. "Baby, I'm so glad you're okay. I was so worried. I knew you would come back." "Of course I did. Jeff has some competition. So has many other criminals out there. Don't go to sleep. You won't wake up. Jane the Killer is coming for you." Okay, so that is way different from the stories that I've heard before. Like, she was just a normal person, and she basically went through the same thing that Jeff and Lou did, where she supposedly died but then came back in the hospital perfectly fine. But this time, she's just a genetic experiment. Okay, so that was Jane the Killer's original story. Now I get why it's called Born from Science. So that was Creepypasta Storytime episode 4. Jane the Killer. And for episode 5, I'm going to do some research for episode 5, so I don't know what I'm going to do for episode 5. So, thank you guys.
Biggie?
Who?
Biggie?
Okay. My girlfriend just requested a newer creepypasta named Vicky the Killer. She's not as very well known by most of the creepypasta community who have been around for a while. So, reading her story next is going to be a real treat because she's still kind of new and not very many people know about her. So, there you have it. Episode 5 is going to be Vicky the Killer. So that will be the end of our Killers saga until we look up reboots or continuations of their stories. So, thank you guys for watching and listening to episode 4 of Creepypasta Storytime, and thank you guys for watching.